All righty, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Government Section 2.5. Government 2.5 is what we're going to get into today. And 2.5 is all about the relationship that existed between England and the colonies of North America. Those colonies of North America eventually will become the United States of America that we live in today. And what's really important for us to understand in this unit is why were there colonies? What did England want with colonies? And how was that relationship changing over time? And eventually what we're going to look at is how that changing relationship will lead to the American Revolution. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is I want to talk about what a colony is. A colony is when a country controls a piece of territory in a different part of the world. Well, in this case, England, which is located on an island in Europe, controlled colonies in North America. Those colonies were Massachusetts and Virginia and Carolina. These colonies that will eventually become states. You're familiar with. All right. And why is it that England wants to have colonies? Well, it's important to understand that England wasn't the only country with colonies. A lot of European countries in the 1500s and the 1600s and the 1700s, they wanted to have colonies all over the world. And that's because colonies played a really important role in the economic system that was in place in Europe in the 1500s and 1600s and 1700s. And that economic system is called mercantilism. Mercantilism is the idea that colonies serve a very specific purpose in the economy. Colonies can provide, for example, raw materials to the mother country. England is located on a relatively small island and doesn't have access to a lot of natural resources. But in North America, there are a plethora of natural resources. There are natural resources all over the place that England doesn't have. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that colonies provide natural resources. The other thing that colonies provide is a market for goods. So England, for example, could sell its goods to the people living in North America. Mercantilism was all about the mother country controlling the economy of the colonies. The colonies existed to serve the mother countries. Okay, so that's how all of this got started. That's why England wanted to have these colonies. It's why Spain wanted to have colonies. It's why Portugal wanted to have colonies. All right, so I want to show you something here. Let's look at this map here. This map here shows us different colonies controlled by different European countries. I know it's kind of small, but you see England here in purple. They control colonies here in what will become Canada, and what will become the United States of America. All right. You can also see over here, like, for example, in India. Okay. It's hard to see, like I said, because it's kind of small. Look at Spain here in this kind of reddish pink color. Look at all the colonies it controls in South America, in Central America, and Western North America. All of these places that today speak Spanish. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because those were started as colonies of Spain. Look at France had colonies. The colony of Louisiana, for example. If you go to Louisiana today, people still speak French, and it's a remnant of this colonial relationship. And the colonial relationship worked well in the beginning. And we're going to talk about kind of why that changes. All right. But from the perspective of England and the English North American colonies, there are really three types of these colonies that we need to be aware of. There are royal colonies, proprietary colonies, and charter colonies. All right. And we need to be able to identify or distinguish amongst the three. Okay. A royal colony is a colony that is completely controlled by the crown, by the king of England. Okay. These colonies really don't have a lot of self rule. They really just exist to do what the king says. Okay. That's a royal colony. All right. A proprietary colony is a little different. A proprietary colony is a colony where the king has given to an individual person the right to go and set up a colony. And that individual person has a little bit of flexibility with how he sets up the colony, with how the colony is ruled. An example of this would be Maryland. Maryland was the proprietor of Maryland was a guy named Lord Baltimore. Baltimore is a city today in Maryland named after him. Pennsylvania was a proprietary colony, and it was set up by a guy named William Penn, and that's why they called it Pennsylvania. And these like I said, the proprietors have a little bit of self, rule there. And then the last uh, form of colony is a charter colony, and the charter colonies have the most freedom. The charter colonies are given the right to essentially self-rule with a few exceptions. And what happens over time is that charter colonies and proprietary colonies start losing those rights, start losing those charters, and eventually more and more colonies are kind of transformed into royal colonies. All right, and that's going to lead to problems over time. The policies of England towards the colonies start changing. All right, and while all of this is changing, the people that are living in the North American colonies, they want to have more individual freedom. They want to have more self-rule, and England wants to give less self-rule. I'm going to show you something here. Okay, so this is, if I just click this link, that's what this one is right here. Okay, look at these acts that England passes. It's just a few. There are dozens and dozens of laws that England passed during the colonial period. But for example, in 1761, England passed a law called the Writs of Assistance, which allowed British officials to search homes and businesses for smuggled goods. In 1763, Britain issued something called the Proclamation of 1763, which restricted settlers from moving west of the Appalachian Mountains and required a license to do trade, to do business with Native Americans. The Sugar Act required really heavy taxes on sugar and all other goods. There's a Stamp Act, which put taxes on certain types of paper. The Townshend Act would put taxes on glass and lead and paint. The Tea Act, which you've probably heard of, the Tea Act kind of manipulated the price of tea so that colonists ended up having to, uh, buy their tea only from the company that England said that they should. And what's happening, if you look at all of these things, is that England is taking more and more control over how the colonies are living their lives. All right. And the people in the colonies are not going to like that. All right. Ultimately, it's going to lead to revolution. Okay. I'm going to skip slides 5 and 6. I'm going to let you read those on your own. Go ahead and do that on your own. But I do want to go ahead and move on to the quick check here. All right. So which of the following happened last? So if we go back and look at our chart here, this is kind of the chart of the order of things. And if you do that, the Stamp Act, the Intolerable Acts, the establishment of the first British colony in the New World, the Writs of Assistance. Well, this one is obviously first because none of these other ones could happen without the colonies being established. Okay, Writs of Assistance was in the 1760s, Stamp Act was 1765, but the Intolerable Acts happened last. If you look at this chart here, 1774. All right, and so we're going to mark that. What is a legitimate government? And this is a really good term here, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about what a legitimate government is. Okay, let's look at the options. One in which government leaders obtain and keep power by force. One that offers the fastest solutions to a nation's problems and citizens' needs. One that is created by union of many smaller groups that could not obtain power on their own. Or one that is accepted by its people and other governments as the sovereign authority of a nation. Okay, this one right here is the right answer. Okay, a legitimate government is one where the people living in that territory accept that the government is in charge, accept that this is our government. Okay, that's the key word here, accept it. So that's a legitimate government. Okay, there's another good term here, popular sovereignty, and we'll talk a little more about this as we go through the unit. But what belief is the principle of popular sovereignty based on? Okay, government must be run by officials who are appointed to office by their predecessors. Government gets its power from the people who can only exist with their consent. The people have the authority to declare any federal or state law unconstitutional by voting on it. The people do not have to obey any laws with which they disagree. Okay. Well, the answer here is this one, the second one. The government gets its power from the people. Okay. Sovereignty means power, popular means people. Okay. So popular sovereignty is this idea that the government exists and the government has legitimacy because the people give it legitimacy. The people allow it to exist. You've probably heard that phrase before, consent of the governed. Okay. It's in the Constitution. We'll talk about that later. All right. So, which of the following best explains the main differences among royal, proprietary, and charter colonies? Well, royal colonies were governed directly by the king. Proprietary colonies were led by elected officials in England, and charter colonies were led by religious officials. Okay. Royal colonies were made up of two house legislatures. Proprietary colonies were governed by a unicameral body, and charter colonies were composed of colonial courts. All right. We haven't talked about unicameral. You'll read about that, but that's an important term. But we'll keep going here. Royal colonies had governors appointed by the king. Proprietary colonies were organized by a person who was granted land. Charter colonies were led by governors elected by male property owners. Royal colonies had governors who were appointed by Parliament. Proprietary colonies were organized by religious dissidents, and charter colonies were set up by officials who received charters for the land. Okay, so the answer there. All right, guys, thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed this, and we will talk again soon.